Welcome to the Grad Life Podcast.
where we talk about all things grad.
And today, we're talking about how you can survive that first year in grad school.
All right, we're back in here at season 2 of Grad Life Podcast. Woo! So first and foremost, I have to give like a little tribute to our former co-host, Rami. He is now a physical therapist. He leveled up. He mastered it. Well, he got his doctorate, so he doctorated it. And he made it happen. So kudos to Rami. He is wishing us well wishes on season 2. But of course, now we have to introduce our new co-host, Sean Devine.
Woo!
Thank you guys. I'm happy to be here.
Sean, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give a little intro.
So I'm Sean Devine. I just graduated at Newman in the Bachelor's in Psychology, and I am now enrolled in the Clinical Mental Health Counseling program, so I'll be starting this fall. I'm 23. Oh, I also sing with Newman's choir. I've been training with our music professor, Dr. Yuki, for the last 4 years, doing private vocal lessons and doing like Italian opera and stuff like that. And
The rest of your intro, sing it.
rest of my intro. I'm good. I can't sing on demand. That's something like I actually
Sing
physically
it,
cannot
sing
do.
it.
I can't. I need like a repertoire, and it has to be like scheduled and everything. It's just how I roll.
Okay. All right. We'll let you off the hook for this one.
Okay.
Well, welcome, Sean.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being the co-host on the Grad Life podcast. And today we're talking about a fun subject. I feel like this is a fun episode for like the first episode of season 2.
Mm-hmm.
How to survive your first year of grad school.
Mm-hmm.
And we have an amazing guest today that is in year 2 of a graduate program. Year 3.
Year
3
3
of a graduate program.
Mm-hmm.
So she's at this point an expert and is going to give us some tips on how to survive that first year of grad school. So you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Cooper. People either call me Cooper or Coop. So whatever you want, call me
Nice.
that. I'm in my last year in clinical mental health counseling here at Newman University. I also got my undergrad here at Newman with a bachelor's in psychology with a minor in history. I am 24 years old.
Whoop, whoop.
I'm in the heat of internship. I'm working. I'm also living on campus. I'm a GA here. So my foot's in a little bit of everything right now. But I'm excited for my final year.
That's amazing. You made it.
I made it.
Succeeded.
Well, we
You're-
still have a year left.
There
We
go.
almost made
You
it.
almost made it. You almost mastered it.
Yes.
All right. So let's just get right into some of these questions that we have for Coop today.
Okay.
I want to know a little bit more about why you decided to pursue grad school and why Newman in particular for clinical mental health counseling.
Yeah, so I took AP Psych in high school and absolutely fell in love with it. The study of the mind, feelings, emotions, all of it. I just fell in love with it. So I knew I wanted to stay local within the community. I knew I wanted a small, intimate college. So when I toured Newman my junior year of high school, I absolutely fell in love with it. I stepped on foot and was like, yep, this is it.
Yeah.
I also really wanted to find a college that I could pursue my soccer career as well. So it kind of had everything. Like Newman had everything. I had the soccer, I had psychology, I had the community. Everything that I wanted was at Newman University. So I was like, yeah, this is it. So I got my undergrad in psych, and I also love history. I'm a history nerd. And so I got a minor in history as well in my undergrad. And still didn't really know what I wanted to pursue in terms of like masters and so forth until I started my own personal counseling my senior year of undergrad. And from that first experience with a counselor, my eyes, my heart, everything just opened up and was like, I could see myself being a counselor. And so I was like, where within my community has counseling programs? And then, I found out that Newman had pastoral clinical mental health counseling. And I was like, let me look into that. And absolutely fell in love with like looking at someone holistically, because I also was rekindling my own spirituality and religion in my life. And so I wanted to see where that aligns with, you know, counseling, and how does one pursue that into sessions and so on. So Newman's program here for the master's literally had everything that I was looking for, but also pursuing in my life at that time. So that's kind of how I got into the master's program here.
I really love that about the master's in clinical mental health counseling program here. Like the fact that it intertwines that faith-based learning. So it's
Yes.
not like you're not stuck to necessarily like one religion. You don't have to be Catholic or Christian. Like you can relate that to any religion or faith that you have, and it's such an important aspect in counseling because people use that. That's a lot of people's foundation.
It could be the simplest things too, like meditation, yoga, all of that has spirituality within it. I think a lot of times people don't know there's a difference between spirituality and religion, right? Religion is kind of more like those rules and basic like principles that you live out. Spirituality is like that energy that is around us 24/7. And it's like, when can you really connect to that energy within anything that you're doing?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, like in terms of spirituality, like I've said this to people, like there's a sense of, regardless of what religion you are, I think there's a sense of spirituality in everybody, like especially when they're going through like a really hard time in their life. Like there's gonna be something that they're gonna want to connect to, and like that's part of what got me interested in the clinical mental health counseling program. I think it's a very universal thing.
So this program that you're in, Coop, is, I mean, it's in person.
Yes.
It's evening format. So a lot of programs that that graduate schools offer are online format, or you know, it's a hybrid-ish format, so they don't have to come in all the time. So I mean, that can create challenges in itself, that you have to be here on campus.
Yes.
couple nights a week. So what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced during that first year?
So I also did my 5th year for soccer. So I was also an athlete while starting my first year of graduate school.
Wow.
So I would say juggling not only my GA position, but also being an athlete and also a student, but also just like a person in general. Like I had so many different type of identities to juggle with all of it. And so I would say that was one challenge. And then I would say the biggest challenge my first year was really sitting down with myself and realizing what is most important and what do I have to move around to accomplish the goals that I have for the future. I think that's the biggest advice I can give somebody going into graduate school, especially for this program that I'm in. You really have to take the time to sit down and really reflect on what you want for your future and what are you willing to do to get to that point. And that means you're going to have to make some real sacrifices in your everyday life to get there. And that's what I had to do. But as long as you're confident in those sacrifices and that you have a support system behind you that can hold you up and you can lean on when things get tough, if you have that, you're fine.
Yeah. Yeah, that support system is everything in that first year.
Yes.
Because especially if you're coming straight from undergrad, like it's a totally different environment. You're not taking 5 or 6 classes in a semester, and that's the main thing you're focusing on. Maybe you have a part-time job or, you know, some family obligations, but when you come into grad school, it's like you're a full-fledged adult, and you're almost like, it's almost like you're working with colleagues that are your professors at that time. So, you know, you're not looking at them as they're the adult, they're the ones that have the responsibility and everything and know everything. It's like, no, they're my professors, but they're also colleagues in a way. So, you know, you're coming into a full-fledged adult program, and you're adulting in that point in time of your life.
Yeah, I was just talking to Jess yesterday, and one of my English professors is entering my cohort in clinical mental health counseling, and I just find that fascinating, the fact that like somebody that like was teaching me. Now we're going to be side by side working on the same things and collaborating and everything together. And another person who helped me with like my job application and getting ready for interviews and stuff like that. She's also joining our cohort. So it's really phenomenal. Like,
I think that's great. Like I always say, the stronger the cohort, the better the experience.
mhm.
And
That's good advice.
my cohort in general is so seasoned. And what I mean by that is that every walk of life is in that cohort, from, you know, people in their 50s and their 60s to people who just got their undergraduate, right? And we're able to bring all those experiences, all of that wisdom, just life itself to that program. And we all hold a space where we can respect it and respect one another. And it really makes that experience better.
Yeah.
So I will say, like, another thing is making sure that you get close to your cohort, because it really makes a difference when you're in that graduate program.
So, were there any strategies in particular that allowed you to maintain that healthy work-life balance?
One strategy is forming some type of self-care routine within my entire week. So, like, I'm someone who's always on the go. From the moment I wake up to the minute I go to bed, I'm doing something, whether that's internship, school, my jobs, everything like that. I'm always doing something. So, where can I put pockets of peace throughout my day that I'm making sure that I'm taking care of myself and my needs? So that's definitely like a strategy that I have, is, you know, implementing a self-care routine throughout my day. Another thing I would say is ask questions and seek advice from people within the program, your professors, even your undergrad professors, right? You know, just because when you graduate doesn't mean that their like advice, their wisdom and all that is no longer available to you, right?
Definitely.
So, you know, I would go to Dr. Etzko multiple times and be like, Dr. Etzko, like, I need your help on this, or I need your advice on this. Or I would go to, you know, Frederick Haas. I would be like, I need your help on this, or what do you think about this? And they would sit down and they would help me. So I would also like implement kind of making sure that you're staying up to date in terms of like seeking out advice and all of that from your undergrad professors, but also your professors in the graduate program.
Most times, like, undergrad professors, like, and this is something maybe we don't always remember, but like undergrad professors had to go through that whole experience too. They most likely already have their master's and their doctorate. So
Right,
even
right.
though they were your undergrad professors, that's awesome advice. Like, still reach out to them
Yes.
and ask
Yeah.
them for advice, because they're going to know a lot about it firsthand.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Were there any like specific resources that you used that you found that were particularly helpful in that first year?
I would say Newman Library database,
Okay. All right.
because when you're writing papers and so forth, you definitely need to know where like peer-reviewed articles will be at, and make sure that you're pulling like valuable information. So I definitely had, I still have Newman's library database on my tab on my computer up.
Yeah.
That is definitely one resource I have. Let's see, what others do I have open?
That's pretty good though, because the database, like, people, that's a hidden gem people forget about. Like,
Yes.
after undergrad, or even like after you're done with grad school, it's like you totally forget about that database. And while it's helpful that we're talking about like the physical things that like can help us, and physical people that can help us during our time in grad school, like those little nuances of those technical things that we can grab onto during grad school, like those are super helpful too. Like, just to be able to read somebody else's work and do peer reviews and stuff, like that's utilizing that database at your school is everything. No one steps foot in like a physical like library anymore, I feel like, but electronic databases are, they can definitely be on point a lot of the times when you're doing that research.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. Everything I feel like is electronic now. Like
Yeah.
from textbooks, like most of my textbooks are actually like hand copy books because I prefer that. But, you know, you can find a lot of these textbooks on Amazon, on anything like that. So it just depends on what type of person you are. Do you want like more of electronic type of textbook, or do you still prefer that, you know, highlighting and writing in the book and everything like that? So it's just like a matter of preference, I think.
And it's good to probably figure that out before you start that first year of grad school. Like, what do you like best? And if you're not coming directly from undergrad and it's been a 10-year gap and you're going back to school, it's like trying to remember, like, how do you work best? Do you like reading books that are audiobooks, or do you like actually holding the physical book in your free time? That's probably what you're going to prefer in your study time too.
Yeah, it's all about trial and error. You know, I think that's something that we all bring in like a graduate program, because we're all coming from different ages and so forth. Is you have to be willing to do trial and error, right? So maybe as an undergrad, I preferred the electric textbooks, and then I switched over to more of that hand copy books, right? It all depends on that and like working through that. Like, see if it works. If it doesn't, make a tweak here and there and go from there.
Yeah. And you got to have the right tools. Like,
Right.
literally the right tools. Like, if you are coming to grad school and you don't have a laptop, I mean, that's like, in this day and age, you kind of need those right tools to be able to be successful, just the way with the times are going and everything. So, and you have to be able to have email on your phone to be able to quickly message your professor or your advisors, and the portals. All schools have a portal now. So just those actual tools that we use can make that first year a breeze once you start understanding all of those things that deal with grad school, of those extra tools, those electronic tools.
I will shout out Betsy, because
Director of grad admissions.
yes, that's another place I would utilize as well, because there are people who are going to be coming into a graduate program who don't have access to computers or to like technology or the textbooks and so forth. So, you know, going to the actual director, like Betsy herself, like I was in a need of a new computer, and I was not in a financial like status to get one. And I just went up to her and I was like, hey, can we have a conversation? And we sat down and I was like, look, I'm desperate in need of a new computer. Do you know of any people who are selling, or do you know of anyone who's trying to get rid of a computer? And she was like, Coop, I got you.
Yeah.
And she was able to get me a computer and so forth. So it's really also utilizing like the resources that are right in front of you, which is the graduate program itself. Like you, Betsy, Kurt, all of you guys.
Yeah.
You know, even if you guys don't have the answers or the resources, you all are willing to find that for your graduate students.
And it's important. Faculty and staff at the school are your advocates. We want you to do well. So when you're in a graduate school and you're going into night classes and snacks aren't stocked up in, you know, the cafe area, don't go by the wayside and not say anything.
Yeah.
Say something, voice your opinion, because you're going to be in this graduate program for 2 to 3 years maybe, and it's just going to continue to happening. So be a voice and reach out to the people that are right there, that faculty and staff that you talk to every day, and they will be advocates for you in most cases. I can't speak for everyone, but in most cases they'll be advocates for you and make something happen.
I agree. Yeah, Kurt saved me a few times in terms of like snacks and food, because I will say that is another advice I will give, is if you are having night classes in a graduate program, make sure you pack dinner. If you can, pack multiple snacks.
Yeah.
And always have $5 or something like that, either in your bag or in your car, because you are going to get hungry.
Yeah, definitely. That's probably the best piece of advice you can get. Pack the snacks, guys.
Honestly, big back.
So building more on like what you told us about like building a network and how you utilized all your resources to your advantage, right? So how did that impact not only your experience at Newman, but how do you think having this support network might help you when you get into the work world, when you become a licensed clinician?
Um, it will help in the sense of if we're looking for a job, if we have to refer a patient or client to somebody different, or, they need some type of resources or anything like that. The connections and relationships you build in your graduate program is preparing you for once you're out of the graduate program and kind of building that network and keeping that network, right? So for me, I have all my cohorts' emails, and I think I have almost everyone's phone numbers. Because for me, I really value each and every one of them and what they bring to the class and also to the program. And the beauty of our program is that everyone's going to go in somewhere different. Private practice, group counseling, addiction. It doesn't
Right.
really matter. Having their, email addresses, their phone numbers and all that will help me in the future in case I need to, refer a patient or a client, or I just need advice, or I need to know, like, what do I need to study for the NCE when I have to take the national exam? Like little things like that, you can always go back to your cohort and so forth. So it kind of is just preparing me for the future and so on, and just like building those relationships and those connections.
That's awesome. All right. So tell me a memorable experience or maybe a turning point that significantly influenced that first year of grad school.
So I would say my introduction to pastoral clinical mental health counseling, our professor was Sister Suzanne. Shout out to Sister Suzanne. She is a lovely woman. I would say the minute I walked into that first class and she started to speak, I absolutely knew that I was in the right program.
Wow.
The energy, the light, the wisdom, the knowledge that she was able to bring into that class really showed me and kind of like sealed the deal that this is the program for me. And ever since that, like, I have really enjoyed or loved each class that I was in. But Sister Suzanne, like, she didn't sugarcoat anything, and that's what I really appreciate. She was like, look, we can go over this textbook a million times. We can go over the definitions, all of that. You have to be in the real world to experience it all.
Yeah.
Because what is said in the textbook might be completely different when you're with a patient or with a client and so forth.
Right.
You have to get the experience. And that is the biggest takeaway. And it's so true. As I'm in my internship right now, there is so much I have learned just from interactions with patients. And the textbook does not give it justice
Yeah.
or anything like that. The textbook is great in terms of like references and, definitions and just like basic knowledge of counseling itself. But if you really want to be a well thought out counselor and so forth, whatever field you go into, you have to get that experience outside of the classroom and outside of the textbook. So I would say that was definitely like my most memorable or like turning point was that very first class with Sister Suzanne.
Yeah. There's so many times where like you're in grad school and you're not going to remember what the textbook said. You're not going to remember the class notes all of the time, but you remember the experience and that feeling that you had
100%.
during that time. And then that triggers your memory to be like, that's what it said.
Yeah.
And that's what it was talking about. And then when you get into the real world, or if you're already working in the real world while you're in grad school, you refer back to those moments and say, oh, this is what the textbook was talking about. I remember feeling the same way when I read it as I do when I'm experiencing it in real life.
100%. I don't even remember what I ate yesterday.
Yeah.
Let alone what I learned in my sophomore year of undergrad school. Like, you have those experiences are what's key, right? Because you're going to connect a feeling or emotion to that experience that was so powerful or so raw that you're going to remember it. And so if you go through that similar experience or anything like that, you go to that feeling or that emotion, and all of that kind of like brings the knowledge and the facts and just all of that. It already just brings it up.
Mm-hmm. Is there any type of advice that you could give to incoming graduate students to help them thrive in that first year? I know we talked about a lot of different tips and whatnot already,
Yes.
but like, what is one piece that you would say to Sean, for instance? Sean is about to start this master's in clinical mental health counseling program. What do you want to tell him and other people that are in that same situation about to enter grad school?
Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to change or mess up or anything like that. And what I mean by that is undergrad is very different than graduate school, right? So it's a lot more like papers and so forth and not so much exams and everything like that. And so, you know, you're going to have to change in terms of learning styles and everything like that. And sometimes that can be hard for people having to make that change. But you have to be willing to do that, or at least meet the professors and so forth halfway, right? And you also just have to know that you're going to make mistakes within the program itself in terms of like internship and all that. But you have to learn from them, right? So any type of mistake that I've made throughout the program, I take the time to reflect on it. What did I do wrong? What could I have done better? What did I do right in it, right? And then I move forward. So I would say that's the biggest advice I can give is, you know, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to change, to mess up, anything like that.
I kind of have a follow up on that. So, what would you say to a student that's like, I don't want to say like maybe not afraid, but could be like nervous to be in that vulnerable state to take accountability? Like, how could you ease? What advice would you give to help ease someone's anxiety to be like, it's okay to be in this vulnerable state of, okay, I'm going to be accountable for my actions. I'm going to take over here and know that I'm messed up and like, but be okay and be, what's the word for it? Kind of like sort of find comfort in like that uncertainty.
Grace.
Could you like kind of like, what do you mean by that?
Give yourself grace. Give yourself patience, understanding. Be empathetic with yourself because at the end of the day, you're a human being, right? So it's very hard as human beings to be vulnerable in any situation. And it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, especially in a program like ours for clinical mental health counseling. You're sharing your life experience and events with strangers, which is what counseling is all about. You're literally sitting in front of somebody and you're sharing raw information in front of someone you don't even know, right? That takes a lot of courage and that takes a lot of vulnerability, right? And so within all that, you have to give yourself grace. You have to be patient with yourself. You have to be understanding with yourself. And, you know, that takes like some self-reflection, that takes moments of silence. That just takes like getting to know yourself a little bit better, right? And it's okay if it takes you a little bit longer than somebody else to be vulnerable or to take accountability, right? But you have to be willing to get there,
right?
And so forth. So I would just say, give yourself grace and all that.
So what's like a time within the program that you had a challenging setback or something where like you kind of had like that internal conversation with yourself and you're like, I think it's time to give myself grace? Could you give like an example of that, what that looked like?
Yes. So there's a lot. So in our program, you have to have all your paperwork done at a certain time, right? And I knew that some of my paperwork will not be in by the time Dr. Park wants it, right? And I had to really give myself grace and say, it's okay. As long as I communicate with Dr. Park, hey, this is when I'm able to provide the paperwork. Is that okay? I'm fine, right? So I really just had to take the moment and be like, Emily, it's not the end of the world. It's not like you're not going to graduate or go into internship 2. You just have to be patient.
Right.
You have to communicate. You have to be like, okay, let me wait. Let me figure this out, and it will be fine. Take a deep breath. It will all be fine, right? I would say like that's one example of just providing myself grace and knowing that like just because I'm a little bit behind in terms of paperwork doesn't mean that like it's going to affect my overall goal of graduating.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot that I think people, when they first come into grad school, they don't understand that the professors are humans too.
Yes.
And they're asking for grace just as much as you are.
Yeah.
Maybe not
Definitely.
just as much, but a lot.
Yeah.
And so you have to understand that everyone kind of has to give each other grace when it comes to those things. And life happens.
Yes.
Grad school, like I said earlier, you're not just an undergrad student working a part-time job or maybe having some little family responsibilities. You're in grad school. You're a full-fledged adult. Most times you're working 40 hours a week and having to do a program and having to take care of a family or take care of family obligations. So things happen, things come up, and I think that is really, really true. Give yourself some grace on everything that you're doing.
And communication. Communication is key, especially in a graduate program. You have to know how to communicate not only to the other students in the program, but to the professors, right? So like that professional, what's that word? Like professionalism.
Yeah.
You
Right.
have to know how to write an email. You know, you can't just be like texting or anything like that. Like
send a text type
send a
of email.
text.
It's like, oh, come
yeah.
on now.
You actually have to be like, dear Dr. Park.
Yeah.
Like you have to be able to give them that
Etiquette.
type of respect and all of that. So like you have to be willing to communicate as well, because it is so true. Like life happens, and the professors know that because their life continues to happen as well. So they communicate to us, and they expect us to be able to communicate to them, right? So you have to be able to know how to do all that in advance as well.
Sean, do you mind sharing just something that you're excited about as you're entering into the first year and about to be full-fledged immersed in the first year of graduate school?
Oh my gosh. There's honestly I can't narrow it down to one thing. Like I am so incredibly excited because I was looking into this pastoral counseling program probably since junior year, and I realized I started thinking of the idea of having a private practice and what that could look like and like my specialization. So in particular, like I'm looking into marriage and family counseling and also working with veterans and PTSD and things of that nature. And just like as I start to meet people, I want to say like in real life, like outside of the off-campus setting, and start to talk about these things and the impact I'm able to make, because I'm a nerd, I'm a gamer, and I love to play games online. And I've spent probably the last 8 years advocating for people's mental health online, talking to people, because some people they might not have that support system. So this is just something in my life that is just constantly ongoing. Like it never kind of like what Emily says about like she's always doing something. Like I kind of have that mentality as well. But like when it comes to grad school, not only am I excited to continue working with your team as a graduate assistant, I mean, you guys are amazing. I mean, everybody's so supportive.
Kudos
and like,
to grad admissions.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're so great. I felt so warmly welcomed by them, and then also being able to apply anything that I get to learn this first year, because I'm also a respite care provider. So spending time doing that, with some kids and being able to like physically start to apply anything that I can start to learn. I think that's just the most rewarding part, is that like there's this like parallel between what's in class and then what I'm able to apply directly right outside of it. I think that's really like I think that's the biggest thing I'm looking forward to in terms of this first semester before I start to get into the clinicals and everything else, and narrowing down are the two fields of psychology I want to focus on.
Before starting your first year of graduate school.
Ooh. I'm only speaking on this in the sense because I did my 5th year for soccer, is like a little bit of how to balance a little bit better with sports on top of graduate school. Like, I wish I knew a little bit more like how to balance that, because a lot of times when you're in graduate school, you're not playing any more sports, right? So you're going into graduate like not expecting to have to like leave a game early to go to class and so forth, or have to like give your graduate professors your like schedule, your game schedule. So I wish I knew how to like balance that aspect a little bit better when I was in my first year. But other than that, like I really will shout out my undergraduate program. Like I really do think they prepared me for what graduate would be like. And I'm especially going to shout out Dr. Etsko because she really prepares you for like how writing will be like in graduate school. And so she and just the general like cohort of that undergraduate program, they all did a really good job of like that transition and so forth. And it also helps that I was here for my undergrad.
Yeah.
And
So
going
you're
right
familiar.
into, so I'm familiar with the area, I'm familiar with the people, like, and everything like that. So I was very blessed in that aspect. So I will say, like, for people who are coming from a different college or like this is, their first experience and so forth, like, really get to know your graduate professors, really get to know your cohort, and really get to know like the graduate program and like who's involved and who's in charge and everything like that.
Yeah. It's also helpful, like what we do at Newman is we have shadow class events. So
Yes.
like, we have opportunities for students to come and visit the class without being enrolled and just visit one class, see what it's like to get there and what the classroom looks like. And I think that's helpful for people that didn't go to an undergrad, didn't go to graduate school where they went to undergrad. So it gives them an opportunity to kind of see what things could be like. And it's just having as much experience and being familiar with as many people and environments that you can before you actually start the program. It'll help alleviate a lot of those challenges when you first get into the program and really get started.
When I shadowed my class a few months ago, oh my god, it opened my perspective so much. Like in that class in particular, it was trauma and crisis, so it was some pretty heavy topics. But it made sense that we were meeting in person for this class, and I had been taught by this professor in undergrad. However, like nothing can compare. I guess like some of the biggest takeaways was you're not just learning from undergrad like you just look at the slides, right? And there's information or whatever and they're kind of just lecturing. It's what you read. Like we would read a case on a slide, the professor would talk about their experience as a counselor, and then it would be opened up for discussion for the whole class, of which I think there was an age range. I mean, I was like a baby compared to everybody. I mean, there was so we have a theology professor, Father Lowe, and his cousin was in that class, and she's, I would say, probably 60, 70, somewhere like that. So like, I mean, that is such a wide age range between all of us. And I was learning from not only the professor but everyone's life experiences too, because everyone comes from different places. So it was just, oh my god, within that 3 hours I feel like I got like I want almost a couple weeks worth of experience and I don't know if you want to say like instruction, but
But now you feel more confident about starting the program because you took.
Oh, 100%, and it reinforces what Coop said about like the stronger your cohort, the better. So like I can't wait to build connections with these professors, for example, that I worked with in undergrad, and then we're going to be collaborating together. And just because I'm younger doesn't mean there aren't things that I'll be able to still apply to the conversation.
Oh yeah,
because there's new things up and coming that other people might not be accustomed to yet. So it's the shadow in the class was a really good experience. I would 100% recommend students to shadow a class. You get a feel for what it's like, the timing of it, sitting through the 3-hour lecture, and we get like 5-minute breaks, I think, or 15-minute breaks every hour or something.
Depends on the professor.
It may
Depends on the professor.
So, but then again, it was good that you went, so you got an idea. Okay,
Yeah.
well, this one's gonna be a little more lenient. This one might be a little tighter on time.
right.
Yes.
That's
Right.
true.
Yeah, you might be a little bit over 9 o'clock for certain professors. Some you might get a little out early. It all depends.
Depends. Yeah.
But I've heard that sometimes discussion can naturally carry a class past 9
Oh,
o'clock,
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. If the conversation is flowing and all that, like that's where really the learning happens,
Yes.
right? Is when
Yeah.
you're able to bounce off with one another, you're able to share experiences and life events and all that. So it's just natural to go over the 9 o'clock, and that's okay. But if it feels like your eyes are drooping
Yeah.
and all that, sometimes you're like, let's go.
Yeah. It's kind of like read the room a little bit.
Yes.
might have to get out of there.
I have a really good follow-up question on that. Do you think that in grad school you could get a student could get to a point to where they're enjoying their program so much to where it doesn't feel like it's too much like work? You don't feel like so much like, oh, I have all these. It's like it doesn't have as much of like that school type of burden that like we might have had in like high school or in undergrad.
I will
with
say
all the classes.
I will say I'm in that right now.
You think so?
I will say, like, I don't know if you all like have heard this before, but like since this is a 3 to 4 year program, like I considered like my first year as like that freshman year of high school, right? Like you're dipping your toes, you're getting used to that like environment and that culture and everything like that. The second year is like that junior year where you're figuring out internship and what you want to do and all that. So like you're in the heat of everything, right? So like it's really intense, like you're just like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to get through this? And now like things are settled in, right? Like I'm in internship. I'm happy where I'm at. I've been able to make adjustments within my life itself to work around like my class schedule and everything else. Obviously there's still stressors and so forth, right? And there's still homework and things I have to get done and all that. But I'm finally at a point within the program where I'm like, okay, I have a year left. I know what's coming along. I know what I have to do. I'm literally almost there. So what's the point of stressing about it when literally I can see May 2025 around the corner?
Just look towards the future. And that'll
Yes.
get you by.
Not too much of the future. You don't want to look so far into the future that you don't like appreciate like your everyday life and like what's happening in the moment. But it definitely helps you to be like, okay, calm down, relax. You're almost there.
Would you say you're coasting?
I would say yeah. I'm kind of
think
like
so?
in that thing where I'm coasting and so forth. Like, classes, I feel good in my classes. Like, I feel good in terms of like my work and all that. And I will say, like, you have to be organized and all that, right? So like, if you're someone who's not organized and like waits for the last minute to do homework and all that, you might be a little bit more stressed compared to me because I'm someone who does my homework a week in advance or writes a paper that is due like next week. I'll work on it 2 weeks in advance, right? So that I'm not building that stress and so forth. So it also depends on like what type of person you are, right? So I know like for me, like I make sure that I don't add any more stress that's already there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Well, Coop, we thank you for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I think all of these tips that we're giving to survive that first year grad school, like it may be things that you're not quite ready to think about just yet because if you're listening, you might have already gone through it, or maybe you are about to go through it and you're anticipating it. But honestly, you will get there. And the biggest advice that I've ever heard that was actually said on this show last season is you can do anything for a season. So continue to strive in that and think about that as you are navigating that first year of grad school, and soon enough you will master it.
Yes.